Hello, welcome to the Althea Show. And we're here today with our former Mayor Nenshi, who's running for Premier of Alberta with the NDP caucus. It is such a honor to have you here, Mayor Nenshi. I can't take the mayor out of my mouth.
You don't call me mayor anymore. I'm not the mayor anymore. But Althea, it is great to see you again. We spent a lot of time together when I was mayor, and it's great to see how well you're doing in the new show.
That is fantastic. Thank you. I have so much questions for you today for the people in Alberta and around the world to kind of get a feel for the reason. So the first thing I'm going to ask you, can you tell me what's the reason why you decide to run? Why did you come back to politics, first of all?
Well, I finished being mayor about 2.5 years ago, and I have been having a great retirement. I've been doing lots of fun things, traveling a lot, making some money, and figuring out ways of doing community service in a new way. If you've ever heard me speak before, you know that I always talk about the Sanskrit concept of seva, which means selfless service. And I've been encouraging people to do service in their own ways while I figure out how to do service in my own way. But like many people in Alberta, I've also been increasingly troubled by the direction of the world, the direction of the province, and particularly the direction of our provincial government. And a lot of people said to me from across the province, Naheed, this is no time for bystanders. We can't just sit back and watch the world right now. It's a critical time for us to get engaged and to get involved. And they kind of also said to me, look, you're not very good at very many things, which is true. Do not come if you need a problem fixing your car. Do not ask me to help you. Bad things will happen. Do not ask me to patch your drywall. Bad things will happen. But what I am good at, I think, is helping people think about a better goal and engaging and mobilizing people towards a better future. And I think it's true. This is no time for bystanders. So I took a deep breath and I said, oh boy, and here we are again back in politics.
So you took a plunge. My first question to you is, what do you think you can do differently at a provincial level that you couldn't do when you were a mayor?
I love being the mayor, and because my world comes from a love of community, but also I love cities. I rarely go on a beach vacation. If I get the chance to go on a vacation, I'll go to a big bustling city. And so I've always been excited about cities and the work that cities do. Now, provincially, what's critical is that the province, and a lot of people don't know this because you don't remember your high school social studies or maybe you never learned it, but the things the province are responsible for, the things that really have to do with human beings and the services they need. So healthcare, education, social services. And I tried to do work in all of those areas when I was mayor, but ultimately I didn't really have the authority to do it. So provincially, I think these are the things we need to focus on. And precisely these are the things that I think our current government is not focusing on. They're so busy picking fights with the federal government, with each other, with different Albertans, that they're not focused on how do we make the healthcare system better, how do we make education better, how do we help people living in poverty, how do we help people struggling with mental illness. And so yes, you have to build a strong economy. Yes, you have to fight climate change and be a leader in the world in fighting climate change here in Alberta. But you also have to do that with the heart of how you're trying to help people. And I really believe that that's what this government has lost.
So let's talk a little bit about the healthcare system, as you just mentioned. In a provincial level, how would you change that system? Because right now, people are waiting in the hospital for almost 24 hours to get looked at. What do you think? That's a crisis that's happening right now. How can we fix that?
Well, and far too many of us don't have a family doctor. We have challenges with mental health. So the whole system, we've been talking since the beginning of the pandemic about how the system keeps going to the brink of collapse. But in many communities in Alberta, it has already collapsed. And, part of the challenge is straight up money. We've got to be able to fund the system adequately and pay people adequately. But I think it goes deeper than that. I think that we've got a government right now that just doesn't respect the people working in the system. Whether it's the people working at the front line in low-paid jobs, which are often racialized women, whether it's the doctors or the nurses or the administrators, there's just a real lack of respect. But I have to say the problem that I'm having is that I know that I won't be in government for at least 3 years. I'm running for leader of the party right now, but there won't be a general election until right now, the fall of 2027. And so I don't know what we'll be inheriting in 2027. But rather than see that as a problem, I'm seeing that as an opportunity to talk to Albertans about their ideas on how the system can work better. And I think it's important to do that because I think that we need to really co-create with Albertans something that makes sense. But I'll tell you that right now, if you were to ask the current premier, what's wrong with the healthcare system? She's like an onion. You have to peel back many layers. But if you ask that question many, many times and you get to the core, she will say, well, Alberta Health Services spends too much on administration and too much on management. And all the studies show that AHS actually spends less on management than other organizations its size. But I think that most Albertans would agree that AHS needs reform. I think that very few Albertans would agree that they trust Adriana LaGrange and Danielle Smith to make that change. But here's what I don't understand, because LT, I'm not that smart, right? I'm just not that bright, and some things that I just can't figure out. But if you believe that there's too much money being spent on management now, and your solution is let's create 4 new organizations where there used to be 1, how does that lead to less management when you're creating 3 new management layers? So I just don't get it. But I'm really aware that if I'm lucky enough to be the premier in 3 years, I cannot go to the people in the system and say, you've just gone through this incredibly difficult, wrenching organizational change. Let's do it again. That'll kill people. So we have to work with what we've got, and I think it has to start with a base of respect, and it also has to start with understanding that there needs to be more money in the system, and we've got to go find the money.
Welcome back. We're here with Naheed Nenshi, and I love to say the mayor, but he's not the mayor anymore. He's running for premier for the NDP caucus. Naheed, I have to think because I'm really, really want to say mayor. You got it stuck on you.
In the U.S., you keep your title forever. So if you were mayor for the day, you get to be mayor forever. But in Canada, we're just all regular people. So when you're done being mayor, you go back to being just a normal person.
I don't think there's anything regular about you, but we'll leave it right there. The question I just asked before we went to commercial was about wages. So can we talk a little bit about wages? And it's 3 years you're saying if you do get in, but do you believe that you should be raising the wages now compared to what's going on?
Yeah, when Rachel Notley was first elected premier, the first NDP premier in 2015, they raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And when I was mayor, I basically said, we need to raise our minimum wage. I don't know where you got $15. I don't know where you got 2018. But we need to raise it in a way that doesn't lead to a whole bunch of unemployment, but that lets people have a decent way of life. And I think that was the right thing to do. Currently, today, Alberta's minimum wage is the second lowest in the country. And I don't need to tell anybody that we're in an affordability crisis right now. Everything's getting more expensive. Groceries, insurance, utilities, all your bills. And so it's important to be able to keep up. And, the UCP has not signaled that they want to increase the minimum wage. I think the smartest thing is just to put the minimum wage on an escalator where it increases at some rate that is related to the rate of inflation so that we don't have this fight all the time and then have to increase it by a lot all at once. To me, that's the right thing to do. So we'll see if the UCP does anything over the next 3 years, but certainly if they don't, then that's something that a new NDP government would have to address quickly.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you one more question. This is coming totally honestly from you to the people. If you became premier, what would you change in the system for the people? We're going to talk about the people. Tell them what you would do for them.
I think right now the challenge that we've got is that politics it's always been a bit like this, but it's worse than I've ever seen. Now, I was in politics myself for 11 years, but I've been a student of politics my whole life. And for me, the real problem, well, there are many, many problems we have in politics right now, but one of them is it's become about itself. So when you look at our provincial government right now, they love to pick fights. They pick fights with the federal government, with Trudeau. They pick fights with one another. They pick fights with the cities and the mayors. They pick fights with LGBTQ plus people. And so they've almost forgotten the role of government, which is to work for the people. And, you know, when we've got our kids sitting in classes, the class sizes are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and there are no teachers, when we have a curriculum that is designed by ideology, not designed to help students set up to be successful in the world, these are great examples of how we've forgotten about the people. And you know, when I was mayor, it's hard to be the mayor and not think about the people because you deal with them every day, and they deal with the services that you provide every single day. But too often, you know, provincial and federal governments forget who they work for. And so, you know, when I was mayor, I always used to say, I love public transit. I know a lot about public transit. But the person who is the expert in public transit is the person who takes the bus every day.
Absolutely.
And she can tell you when the system is working, what doesn't work, what irritates her, what you could do to make it better. And I would take that same mindset to the provincial government, to always be thinking about putting the citizen at the center of the work we're doing.
There was an article the other day that they were talking about the bus passes. Did they take the bus passes away, or was it given back to the people?
Yeah. So what happened is, when I was mayor, one of the things that I'm most proud of is that we were able to fund something called the sliding scale low income transit pass. And what that meant was that if you're very poor, you could get a bus pass for as little as $5 a month. And this is unbelievably important to people. It changes people's lives forever. And far, far, far more people started using this pass than we had expected. And I realized that was because there was a huge number of people in our community who were very poor, who we never had any visibility to. We never saw them because they were stuck in their homes, they were stuck in their neighborhoods. This bus pass allows them to go to school, go to work, go to the doctor. And, you know, the provincial government, out of the blue, a couple of weeks ago, Danielle Smith just said, well, her minister just said, we're cutting the little bit of money that we give to the city to pay for this program. Within 24 hours, they said, no, that was a misunderstanding. We didn't mean it. We're going to keep it going for one more year. And then we'll decide next year what to do with it. But these are the, to your earlier point, these are the things that really make a difference in people's lives. And for the provincial government, $4.5 million a year to Calgary is very little. You know, the money they wasted on the Turkish Tylenol would have funded the Calgary program for 20 years.
Absolutely.
But it's another example of how they're not putting the citizen at the center of what they do. So folks, if you use this pass, if it's important to you, you've got it for another year. But it's important that your voices are heard by your MLAs and by the UCP government. This program is important, and they have to fund it for the long term.
So let's explain to the people how to use their voice, because a lot of people say, I have MLA here and I go to them for this and I go to them for that, and nothing ever happens. Can you explain to the people what they actually need to do so that they can get things done?
You got to just keep being loud. I don't need to tell Althea that you got to be loud, but because, you know, every time you phone, and I always encourage people to phone, like an old person, phone the MLA's office, don't email or don't send something online. Because everyone who works in those offices knows that for every person who takes the time to phone, there are dozens of people who feel the same way. So that's really how you influence folks. And you tell your real story. You don't go in there with all your guns blazing, with anger. You just say, here's my story. Here's how I use that bus pass. This is the difference it's made to my life. And I think being authentic and real and telling your real story in person is the real way to have people start to listen. But the other thing is, we also need a new government that is focused on listening. But in the meantime, let's make this one better.
There you go. Naheed Nenshi just told you. Hold on, don't move. We got some more questions coming. Welcome back to the Althea Show, your international host who knows the most, who says the most, who does the most. And we're here with Naheed Nenshi. I'm going to say mayor because he'd always be my mayor. So we're here talking, and we're talking a little bit about you running for premier for the NDP caucus. And we're going to just throw in a little bit about the cost of living right now.
Well, you know, I just came from Superstore. I just was doing some grocery shopping before coming to see you. And like everybody, I kind of raised my eyebrows at how much I ended up paying. And all of us are complaining, right, about the cost of groceries. But for me, I'm lucky enough that it's just a complaint. But, when I look at, the cooking oil that my mother uses, which has gone from $7 to $21, and I think about, and that's the cheap kind because, she's an Indian lady who uses a lot. But when I think about the fact that for me, that's an inconvenience, it's something to complain about. But for many of our neighbors, this is forcing very hard, some would say life and death decisions on how you feed your family. People are really nervous. And when I look at the statistics, I can say, well, the economy is doing really well. Overall unemployment is low, the economy is growing, but people aren't feeling it in their real lives. And here in Alberta, our unemployment is the highest in Western Canada. Our inflation rate is the highest in Canada. And we got to get this under control. And I'm just not sure that our current government is frankly serious enough with the policy things they have to do to help get this under control. It's not easy. I wish I could wave a magic wand and say I'm going to control the price of eggs. I can't do that. But we need to put a whole bunch of stuff in place to make sure that people can afford to live today and into the future.
Can we all, yeah, because I can feel the pinch too in the grocery, but can we talk about the rent? Why don't we have rent control?
We haven't had rent control in Alberta, I think, ever. It's not really a conservative idea. And, there are a lot of reasons that rent control can be a problem. If you institute rent control too much, too hard, then there'll be no incentive to build new places because landlords can't make any money. And then you run into a real supply crunch. And that's happened in many, many places. I was just recently in New York City, and you can see that certainly had happened there over the course of many years. That said, it is also very true that our system right now is overheated. It's too hot. And so there's a real argument to be made that if you were to be able to put in temporary rent caps to just kind of take some of the heat off the system for a couple of years while you're investing in all the things it takes to build more rental housing, that altogether could be a good solution. But right now, the provincial government won't even talk about it because they just refuse to even think that rent caps might be a good idea even in the short term.
I don't believe that they understand that there's people actually living in their car. People are actually living in garages. People are not living properly. So they have to take heed to the people's word. And I don't understand why they can't see that.
Well, when you just think about what rents are right now. So, I have a little place that I was renting to a friend of mine for many, many years. And he was an older person who needed a place to live. And I didn't raise the rent once in 11 years. Then when he moved out, I had to do a bunch of renos because he'd lived there for a long time. And I went to look at what the market rate was, and I was shocked at how much more it was. But, you can't charge too much below the market, and I needed to make money back on the renos and everything. Yeah. And so I sort of took a breath and charged a little bit less than market rate. And then this is only 6-8 months ago, and I recently just was looking again, and the rent in the same building has gone up so much more. And I feel bad for my tenants, but they're paying way less than even what other people are paying today. And I don't know how you can afford, and I've got a senior couple in there, and I just don't know how people can afford to live.
Some people will look at you and say, Naheed, you have the money, they can live. You're okay, you shouldn't be complaining about nothing.
Well, you know what, I'm so lucky, right? I'm so lucky because I did the single smartest thing you can do to create wealth for yourself.
Yes.
Don't have children.
Hold on to that. We're going to take a break and we'll be right back. We're back here with Naheed Nenshi. And I want to say my mayor. I will always say my mayor. I'm sorry. I feel that's what he is. I have a question here for you. And I have to read it from the paper, even though I'm not a reader from the paper. It says, your opponents have raised concern about a letter you wrote 5 years ago suggesting you were willing to alter city union contracts and freeze wages. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Sure, and we can do it very quickly. I've had a record for 11 years of really looking after working people and particularly my colleagues at the City of Calgary. But it is a complex job and a lot of stuff goes on. And there was a point in 2019 where many members of City Council wanted to unilaterally roll back people's wages and break collective agreements, which is both illegal and unethical. And I managed to sort of talk them down into, instead of doing it, let's do some investigation on whether we can do it, and let's ask the province what they think. And I knew full well that the province was going to just tell us to pound sand. And frankly, even if they didn't, if in some weird world they came back and said, oh yeah, you can do that, then I had a whole series of battles to fight with council to make sure we would never do that. And, you know, some of my opponents found this letter. In fact, it was the UCP that leaked the letter. Which is fine, because you know what? I've got 11 years of experience, and you should ask me. I think it's good to ask me about my record and good to listen to my explanations of what we're doing, but I always stand by working people, and I believe that if you belong to a union, the power of belonging to the union is you negotiate that collective agreement, and that collective agreement becomes sacrosanct. It becomes something that cannot be broken. It was hard won, and we have to hang on to it. You know, the UCP likes to tear up agreements. I will not.
I like you because you stand for something, you say what you mean, and you don't go against it. So that's an amazing principle. And from just sitting here with you, I realize you have a lot of moral principle. And I think the governments right nowadays, and I don't want to say because I don't know them individually, I don't live with them, but I feel like some of the things and the decision that they're making seems like the principle is lacking.
Yeah, you know, I've called this current government immoral, and that's harsh words for me. But I think it's true. I think that in a world right now where everyone feels so out of sorts, where everything is shifting and changing so much, you have to be able to go to your morals and ethics to rely on them. And we just have not been doing that. And I think that this government lacks that guidepost, that true north in terms of its ethics. And I hope that's something I stand for.
We're going to talk about why you ain't had no babies. Why haven't you had any children?
You know, it's not all up to me. You need somebody else involved in the whole conversation. But no, the reason that I mention that is actually kind of serious. You know, I'm joking that I don't have any kids, but I'm lucky that way because it gives me some financial freedom. But I think one of the really important things for all of us to understand is that people walk many different paths to live in our community. And every single person deserves a life of dignity and a life of opportunity and prosperity here. And I think too often when you get into politics, you think everyone's like you. So I love the theater. So I go downtown and I go to lots of plays. But, you know, I think about my mom who lives in Northeast Calgary who probably hasn't been downtown in years. But when I was mayor, I had to realize there's people who live in Calgary who don't come downtown every day. And we have to think about the services that we provide across the city. So similarly, in running for premier, I have to remember that my life in a super diverse neighborhood in Northeast Calgary and in living and in, you know, coming downtown all the time is very different than the life of someone in Red Deer or Lethbridge or in a small rural community. But every single person deserves access to great public services, great education, great health care, and the opportunity to live the best life that they choose for themselves. And so that's something that I always remind myself. So I'm forever talking about, you know, a great future for our kids and our grandkids. And sometimes people say, whose kids and grandkids? Because you don't have any. But I got lots of nieces and nephews. And, you know, I know that lots of people are very worried about the future, and I join them in that worry as well.
Naheed, it is such a pleasure and an honor to sit with you and have this conversation. And I hope a lot of people get a chance for some answers that they were looking for. You're amazing, and I thank you so much. The Althea Show, we're here with Naheed Nenshi, and we're on our way out. Thanks for joining us on a weekly basis.
Said I got paper plane dreams, guess I'm about to take off. Ain't no point in waiting, I gotta get this cake, bro. Tell me why you hating, little bro, stick to your day job. I saw me be skating, I know it's all gonna pay off. I got paper plane dreams, guess I'm about to take off.